everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Secret to Having an Amazingly Effective Remote Team. I'm Zach Benson, and today I have the pleasure of producing today's webinar for you. To start, I just wanted to quickly explain why we here at CodeDev are experts at building successful remote teams. And honestly, it all just boils down to the fact that we've been helping companies do just that for over 10 years. CodeDev solves staffing problems by providing highly skilled professionals in the Philippines to growing technical companies in the United States. So you could say that we've seen our fair share of effective and maybe not so effective remote teams. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Tony Morrison is a people-first CEO with over 14 years of experience in technical operations and international business. He appreciates opportunities to develop effective processes while working with smart, dedicated people. Tony's personal interests include running, reading, basketball, and going to theme parks, especially Disneyland. Kyle Clark is CodeDev's VP of Business Development with over 10 years of experience in creating winning outcomes for CodeDev's clients. He recently graduated from Brigham Young University's Executive MBA program and enjoys playing basketball, golf, and spending time with his wife and 3 kids. Now, without any further ado, I'll hand it over to the very capable hands of Tony and Kyle. Take it away, Tony.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. And I appreciate all of you taking the time to join us here today to talk about what has become a very important topic. We've all inherited, I want to say, I don't know if inherited is the right word, Kyle, but
yeah, it's very timely with COVID and everything.
Yeah,
so
we're all in remote teams these days, and we have largely been remote. We've been lucky enough to have a few of us coming back to the office and thought we would share a little bit about both what we learned ourselves as a remote team, but also what we've worked with on clients for, as Zach said, almost a decade now. As we start the discussion, I just want to recognize that there's a lot of management basics that many of you already know. In fact, I'm going to assume that everybody has seen a few of the things on this list, if not all of them. And we found among our clients that most of our clients are good at almost all of these. There are things that we're taught in business schools and in corporate trainings, from kind of our first days in business. And the importance of clear roles and objectives, accountability. If you're in an executive role, the right team members. All of these things are things that we are already aware of. And yet there's some differences when you have a remote team, especially when it comes to technical tool sets. We all are familiar with the tool sets we used in the office for, say, communication or project management. However, sometimes there's different tools that you need when you have a remote team. But by and large, we find that most of our clients and people we work with already have those well in hand. And yet, at the same time, we find that there is a struggle to manage remotely. Sometimes we're not getting the results that we're looking for, even though we're practicing those best practices. And I think we can resonate with the look on the face of this woman in the screen here. I know I've had that look from time to time, as many of you might have. So
I think as well, like with remote working, it magnifies the problems that we have in management. So yeah, again, I think this is very timely.
Absolutely. So what are some signs that maybe you need to look beyond some of those basics? If you're experiencing some of these problems with your teams, maybe a lack of initiative or engagement, maybe you've had a high-performing team in the past, but you're finding that you're starting to miss deadlines that you didn't usually miss before. Maybe you have new types of politics cropping up in your organization, or a lack of focus on team goals. People worry more about individual KPIs. If you see any of these kind of signs, there are symptoms that maybe this discussion will be the right thing for you today. And we're going to talk about what we see as the root cause to some of these symptoms. So
I've got a quick question for you, Tony. If people already know and are trying their best to implement these manager basics that you call them, why is there still a gap between what managers want and what they're getting? What exactly is missing in their approach? Any thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there. I think what we found is there's an overall lack of engagement, and you can't force people to be engaged. But I think this is definitely one of the root causes of the problem. And so what we've found is that in order to be a more effective manager And in order to get your employees to be more engaged, you have to build relationships with them. Relationships of trust, are going to take time, but they're important. Back in 2016, SHRM reported that relationships with coworkers were identified by 77% of participants as the top driver of employee engagement.
If I can break in, Kyle, just for those of our audience that might not be familiar, SHRM is just the acronym for Society of Human Resource Management. That is a great organization that does a lot of research for the HR industry, if you will. So I want to interject that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we can see that relationships are very important, and it's a top driver. Also, Oracle Human Capital found that a close relationship with the manager is likely to lead to faith in the leadership and well-being of the company and for themselves. So again, these relationships are key, especially I think in remote settings. In contrast to that, Oracle also found in a study of employees that 47% of employees said leaders are available and approachable, and 44% have confidence in company leadership. Obviously, you can see generally there's a lack in engagement and their voices being heard.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement with those numbers.
Yep.
I mean, as a leader, I definitely hope that 47% isn't representative of our company.
Yeah,
For sure.
After 10 years, hopefully not. Another study that we looked at evaluated engagement in terms of relatedness and interaction and how those are key factors. Relatedness comes from building common ground with your coworkers and employees, having shared interests, things like that. Also, interaction is a key measure. The more interactions that you have with your coworkers, the more communication that's going on and the more engagement overall.
So I have a quick question for you. I think I understand the interaction part. Maybe do you have an example of relatedness that you think would apply here?
Definitely, yeah. So I've had coworkers in the past where usually it's been a newer employee, and there's some personality gaps. But as I try to engage with that employee and find some common ground, for example, I had a coworker. Our personalities kind of clashed a little bit, but as soon as I found out that he was into baseball, all of a sudden I found myself, talking about my favorite team against his favorite team and things like that, and we were able to build some common ground just from a sports endpoint.
Perfect. Okay, so personal interests.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks for the example.
Yep. So yeah, obviously building that common ground and the number of interactions is definitely going to help there.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Those were some really great stats that you found and shared. Now, I assume everyone here watching is similar to me in the fact that they really like to have specific action items in their webinar, things that they can write down and really work on rather than just information that they can listen to. So, Tony, why don't you spend a few minutes on specific how-to information and maybe give a few tips related to building relationships in remote teams specifically?
I'd obviously love to do that. That's one of the reasons we're here. At the same time, I just want to say I don't profess to be an overall expert in everything to do with this. Our teams have a lot of improvement to do as well, but we have found some things that really do work, and that's what we're here to share, is where we have found success. One thing we do as a company is we study a couple books throughout the year, and we cycle through the same books. One of those books is called Leadership and Self-Deception. I recommend it if you haven't encountered it in the past. But in there, the main message is that it's relationships and how you see other people is more important than what you do. That if you see other people as, human beings that have needs and wants as valuable as your own, that you're going to then treat them differently regardless if you're in the same meetings or having the same conversations, and that's a real key to success. As we have tried to apply that principle here at Codev, I think that we can attest to that, the value in that. So I just want to pause before we go into some specific how-to tips that I'll ask Kyle to help me with, of course. Just want to ask these questions and have this in the back of your mind. when you think about your remote team, are they just a path to profits? Are they just there to get work done, to complete tasks? Or do you really know them and see them as individuals and as people? And are you confident that you treat them that way?
So Tony, on that note, how do we focus as companies on profits and on the people and their needs? Because sometimes those can be offsetting. So how do we focus on profits but still adhere to people's needs?
That's a great question, and I think I like that question because it's kind of at the core of this concept, and that is, at the end of the day, those needs that seem to be at odds are completely aligned. I think if you go to any of the great business leaders that we've had throughout history, many times you hear them talk about how their biggest decisions and most important things they did were bringing on certain people to the team, empowering certain people, or even deflecting some of that credit and I don't want to say adulation, that's going a bit far, right? But really giving credit to others around them. And the power of a team is greater than the sum of its parts. And the way to get that benefit for your business is actually by focusing on the people. And sometimes, if you look at a very short-term P&L type of view, there are certain expenses, certain things you might experience that says, wow, this I'm not sure this is good business because we're focusing on people too much. In the long run, that kind of investment really does pay off. And so hopefully that's kind of an answer to your question, but yeah, I do feel like those needs, that as you're meeting those needs in the short term, it may feel like a trade-off. In the long term, it's investment in your business that is going to come back to you.
Awesome, thank you.
So to move on to a few how-to tips, and again, we're not maybe the perfect experts at this, but these are things that we have found that are helpful, and we have shared with some clients and have vetted through that experience over the years. So we're sharing them with you here. The first one, there's a lot of talk about needing to use video, and that's a common tip, and we definitely will echo that sentiment. But we want to add the part where you need to get involved with employees via video. So there's a lot of video meetings, or perhaps you've been in a video meeting where there's a lot of participants and it's still only 2 people talking, or some people show up because they were invited, but it really isn't key to their area or their concern. And you really want to try to make sure you're getting people involved in video. In person, there's less distraction. There's not another screen. There's not going to be a phone in front of them, hopefully, in an in-person meeting. But recognizing those distractions may exist, you overcome that distraction that, again, in the long run, has a large cost to it by making sure they're engaged in those calls.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the video calls are definitely important. Kind of going along with that is just verbal praise. This is super important, especially I think in these remote environments. Employees need to hear that they're needed and that they're providing value. And so the more that you can praise them and show that, the better. I can think back to previous examples in CodeV where I've been verbally praised by managers, but also by other coworkers. And it just makes me feel so good. And I know other employees feel that way too.
And that relates to engagement, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Another one, setting an example and being transparent with your behaviors. As managers of a team, I think we all understand the need to be an example of the behaviors we want to see in our teams. The hard part is transparency. When you're co-located, that transparency kind of comes with the day-to-day, right? You're there together, you see what each other are doing. In this situation where we're remote, it's sometimes a lot tougher to know, okay, what are the behaviors my boss is doing? How can I, where is the example I should follow? So if you're having trouble setting the example or seeing the things you want out of your team, you might pause and look at your behaviors and say, can they see them? Are they transparent? And if they're not, finding a way to make them transparent. And you can do that, again, through video and in meetings and interactions. or just by using systems. If your team's not using the CRM and not everything's up to date, is there a report that shows what's up to date and what isn't? And if there's things that are your items that aren't up to date, where's that example, right? Make it visible for them to see.
I think part of being that example, Tony, is also being accessible. If your employees and coworkers can't reach you, especially when they need you, that's going to make it really tough on them. When you're in different time zones, that just exemplifies the problem. So you have to plan when you're going to have meetings and be accessible with each other, figure out when you're going to have times when you can communicate so everyone can be on the same page.
Absolutely. And we mentioned earlier about being involved with employees on video calls. This next one of being hands-on with new employees is kind of like the upgrade to that one. A new employee is looking for triggers and hints as to the culture and how the business works, what your processes are like, what decisions can they make, what can they not make. And what they really need is an early win. And as managers, a lot of times we understand that a new employee will stop by their desk a little more often, right? Give them a little more attention, more direction. Virtually, I think you need to even go a step beyond that. I would plan a hands-on project with new employees, and whether it's a few days or a few weeks, but it would be a meaningful amount of time where you get in and work with them. So they get all those cues and stuff they would have gotten from you over their first 90 days, say in the first 9 days. And you really do need to shorten that time, because otherwise they're not getting all of the ancillary sort of tips on company culture and behavior that you would expect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think another key aspect, just a few more tips here in working with remote teams. One thing to point out is you don't have the water cooler, right? The typical water cooler in the office where we're working remotely. So you have to figure out other ways to communicate, other platforms to collaborate. Usually every company kind of has their own main communication platform. So identify kind of what that is for you, and then figure out how to communicate on those channels. Maybe you have one channel, for example, that's more social type topics, and another channel for business topics. For example, I was in an MBA program recently, and they set up a water cooler channel just so that we could talk about things that were non-school related, and just to make it more enjoyable.
And you can do that in lots of different platforms, and I'd recommend different platforms, partly because we start to get a little bit of a script. It's like walking into a different conference room. If you walk into the boardroom, there's kind of a script and a mindset that settles in when you go into that location, versus maybe the conference room down the hall or the break room. There's a different script there. So you want to create digital spaces that allow those different scripts to kick in, and for people to know, hey, it's okay to have some personal conversation and chit chat and share a meme or a joke or something like that from time to time. So
absolutely. And I think one of the things that's hard when we're all working remotely is to get into a rhythm. So you want your employees to get into a rhythm where they're used to different meetings and different plans throughout the day. So planning regular meetings is going to be important, so that everyone knows, hey, I've got to be at this meeting at a certain day and time. And then I think nothing can replace face-to-face visits. You've got to plan those in as well. And yeah, we may not be able to visit face-to-face all the time, but making those meaningful and impactful when you can do them is important.
And right now, obviously with COVID-19 restrictions and other things, face-to-face visits in some cases are out. But definitely keep an eye on government recommendations and your own situation, and schedule those afterwards as soon as you can to go take care of those relationships. Right now, we're kind of living on credit in some ways with relationships, and some are improving. That's great, but yeah, it's really hard to replace face-to-face visits. So do schedule those. We talked a little bit about culture here before, but one way that we find is great for culture is to invest in trainings. And there's a lot of sort of subject matter expert SME trainings you might be doing already in sales or customer success, different departments. this is a great time to get together with your HR team and talk about sort of general professional development trainings for everybody. These can be done in small groups, cross-departmental, venues. Online works really well for these, and it lets you kind of create those relationships throughout your company that brings a lot of strength as you build relationships cross-team. So.
Absolutely. And our last point here is one of the most impactful, I think, and that's considering employee input. If you want your employees to be engaged and committed, help them to be part of the ideas, help them to be part of putting those plans together. And as they see their ideas implemented, they're going to be that much more committed to the overall idea.
So if I can throw in a final thought about all these, kind of to wrap up this section of how-tos, you'll notice that pretty much every one of these tips involves communication of some kind. So the converse, if you were saying, okay, is my team healthy or not? If there is silence, then you've probably got a problem to address. Silence is, for remote teams, silence is not a great situation. And you may say, well, we have, let's say we're software developers, we have a lot of heads down individual time where we need to focus. That's true. We have one client that has software developers, and they've chosen, they happen to use Zoom as their video communication tool. For certain hours of the day when it's individual coding time, everybody has a Zoom meeting open the entire time up in the corner. So if there is a question or something, they can ping it off each other real time. There's no setting up a meeting or clicking to log in. They're all logged in the whole time. But it's their heads down time at the same time. They can still focus and they understand each other's focusing, but there's a camaraderie of being focused together. So silence or not being present, probably a bad sign.
In addition to that, Tony, you're absolutely right. If there's silence going on, then you've got to put in extra time to invest in those relationships. You got to make sure that, that everyone's engaged and committed. And if you're seeing that there's a lot of silence, there's probably a lack of commitment and engagement there. So just a reminder, do you take the time to learn about those you're working with? Do you get involved in their personal lives and personal topics? Do you constantly go back and forth and communicate expectations and make sure everyone's on the same page? That's certainly going to be important. And so, yeah, putting in the time is definitely needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely speak to, I can definitely agree with everything that's been said. It's been a little bit difficult, transitioning to working remote, but we've really here tried to put in that time and have communication, and it's definitely helped. So I appreciate you guys sharing all of those tips. Now, since you guys have stuck with us so long, I'm sure you guys are itching to see what results and what benefits you can see if you're implementing all of these. So, Tony, why don't you expound a bit on what positive results people can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we're all in business. There is a part of our responsibilities, which is to produce results. And Harvard did a study a few years ago that found that organizations with higher trust get a lot of benefits, and you see them listed out here on the screen. And there's things like higher empathy, collaboration, recognition, fewer sick days, less burnout. So these are all improvements that happened as trust increased, and trust is really at the core of these relationships that we've been talking about. As far as sort of short-term and long-term, we talked about some of the symptoms that you might be seeing in the short term. Well, those are things that we would expect to improve as you focus on relationships. So fewer missed deadlines, less rework, being able to resolve problems more quickly as you have kind of those tight relationships. And as Kyle said, you're working at a certain pace or rhythm together. And in the long term, definitely we've seen with our clients retention improving, a different commitment level from the individuals where someone is invested in that relationship, or they've invested together, has been part of the results. And an enhanced overall talent pool. As you're able to retain your key players, you're able to focus more on adding talent to the team, and more and more success is kind of the result of that. So those are some thoughts about that. I appreciate, again, everyone joining and taking the time today. I'd like to give Kyle a few minutes to maybe share a little more about CodeEv and what we do.
Definitely, yeah. So you've probably been wondering, where does our experience come from? We've been in business for over a decade now, helping software companies hire and retain software developers overseas in the Philippines. So we've seen a lot of companies apply these principles, and we've seen them work really well in some situations. And so we hope that you've been able to learn a little bit about this. And if you need help hiring and retaining your own software teams, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is here on the slide. Yeah, we thank you for your time today.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a big thanks to Kyle and Tony for sharing all of their expertise and everything they've learned over the years. And thank everyone for joining us. You can see here at the bottom left, here's all of our contact information. If you have any questions or commentary or anything like that. And also just wanted to give a heads up that we've got a lot more content in the works. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thank you guys again for joining us and have a great day.